Hi, Sarah. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Hazel. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So you're in Hawaii right now, is that right?
Yes, I'm in Maui, Hawaii. It is 7:35 in the morning and it's gray outside, but it's still warm.
Nice. Very different from Wales. So, a lot of our listeners are going to be climbers. Have you done any climbing before?
A little bit, really just a tiny bit, but at some point in my life, I was a student in a town called Grenoble in France and didn't have access to the ocean. And I was going to this indoor climbing gym, and that kind of kept me alive during that time because I needed an outlet to have fun. So just a bit, yeah, I really liked it.
Okay, cool. Nice. All right, so just to get started, it would be really nice just to hear like a little bit about, you know, like like a brief overview as your career as a professional windsurfer. And because I know at one stage you grew up windsurfing, but then you took time out, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I learned to windsurf as a teenager, and I rode my first wave at about 15 years old. And that's when I fell completely in love with the sport and knew I wanted to make it a career. But at the time, it was very uncertain. There wasn't a proper path to follow, and my family wasn't too supportive of that. So they told me to basically study, get a degree, and become financially independent. And then I could do what I wanted with my life. So that's what I did. And so that's when I stopped windsurfing because for 5 years, I was super committed to studying. I went to an engineering school in France, specialized in computer science and applied mathematics, and it was very competitive. So 5 years of being on the computer and not doing much sports or being near the ocean. And it was hard mentally because I missed it, but it kind of anchored the idea that that was something I needed in my life, that I needed to make it a priority one way or another. And so when I finally graduated and had my degree and I'd saved up a little bit of money with my internships, that's when I traveled to Hawaii for the first time. I came by myself in 2012 to Maui and entered a competition. And it wasn't necessarily that I knew what I was doing at the time. It was kind of strange how fate unfolded for me in that way. But even though I hadn't practiced at all, I still did good enough to attract a little bit of attention and get a few sponsors. And that's how the ball started rolling. For a couple of years, it was really hard because I couldn't find sponsors. And so to support myself, I was teaching fitness classes in the hotels in Hawaii. But at that point, I had moved to Maui to be fully committed to this, trying to make this work. And then I met a filmmaker and we made a documentary called Girl on Wave about my story, basically. And this documentary helped allowed me to be seen by more eyes and eventually find a sponsor. And I'm today sponsored by a company called Medallia, with an amazing team and amazing leader, and they believe in supporting bold endeavors like mine. And so I've been able to pursue my dreams and compete and also chase big waves. So that's something that's outside of competition, but could be considered kind of like free skiing, when you're a skier and you compete, but you also go conquer those big mountains. And so that's the same idea. We go travel, or in my case, there's a really great wave right here in Hawaii called Jaws. So we try and conquer this wave, and it can be the quest of a lifetime. But yeah, so this has been a really fun journey.
Wow, cool. Great. Yeah, it sounds like you've had a lot of cool experiences and you've got a great story. Um, So I think, a lot of people listening are not going to be windsurfers. So I don't know, it would be good to give us a sense of like what is the sport all about? I know you have competitions and you have these chasing of big waves as you've just described, but um yeah, like kind of what's like the task? Because as a climber, it's really obvious what you have to do. You start at the bottom and you get to the top. With windsurfing, there's lots of different types of windsurfing, right? And it's not all in the ocean. Is that, sorry, I'm like really ignorant about windsurfing. I have watched some videos with you and it looks amazing. But yeah, just like talk us through like what's actually involved, what are the different styles, and kind of what are the like unique challenges of windsurfing?
Yeah, windsurfing is not only in the ocean, you're right. It can be in lakes, any body of water, basically, where there's wind.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we stand on the board and we hold a sail through a part of a piece that's called the boom. And so the sail is attached to the board, and you transfer the wind through the sail and through your body. You transfer that to the board, and that turns it into speed. And so, with that, there are three main disciplines in windsurfing. One is racing, so people try to go as fast as they can on the course and beat each other at the finish line. Then there is freestyle, where it's going to be usually on flat body of waters and doing tricks and complicated moves, kind of like ice skating. That
Like
there are judges.
street skateboarding or something.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, it's exactly the spirit of it. Yeah. And then there's wave sailing, which includes a little bit of tricks, but you have to do that synchronizing with a wave. So you ride a wave kind of like a surfer would ride a wave, except you have a sail in your hand and you have to manipulate it so that you're able to draw the lines that you want on that wave. Sometimes you can use part of the wave to do a trick or jump, but what you want is find the best flow and be in tune with the ocean and with the wave, predict what it's going to do so that your line is not only pretty to watch, but it feels good to you too. When everything kind of clicks in and what's happening at the right time, at the right place, that's the feeling that is chased and that is also rewarded in competition, because it's like freestyle. You have judges giving you points for how well you rode the wave, how much flow, how much risk you took, how much power. So yeah, those are the three main disciplines, and mine is the latter, the wave sailing. And yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, so it's quite interesting. So in the competition, you're actually judged a bit like you would be in figure skating or like um the free ride world tour is in skiing, for example.
Yeah, yeah. You usually out with one or sometimes three other competitors, and you have a set amount of time. And in that amount of time, you need to catch at least two waves. At least they will note your best two waves, and sometimes they will also note your jumps, because while you ride the waves when you go toward the beach, when you go back out toward the ocean, the wave is kind of like a ramp that you can jump
Okay,
and
right.
do some big tricks. So it depends where the competition is happening, and the judging criteria will adapt to the different spots, because every wave, every beach, every spot is different. So it's a very there's a lot of elements that change. Like the ocean changes, but those criteria change. It's a subjective way of competing. So it's dealing with a lot of uncertainty and things out of your control all the time.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely like a more fluid sport than climbing, like climbing the rock. It's just there. It doesn't often change. It can be loose, but it's pretty stationary. And it seems like there's
Yeah,
a
I
lot
mean,
of
I think
variables.
there are, but I'm sure that, I mean, as soon as you step outdoor to do a sport, there's going to be things out of your control, where it's the weather and the temperature and yeah, the rain or whatever. So I think, yeah, all outdoor sports have that element of unpredictability.
Yeah. And a question about kind of so, in surfing, you just ride the wave, right? And you build up speed by paddling. when you're windsurfing, what's the primary force behind you? Is it the wind or is it the wave, or does it depend where you are in relation to the wave?
It's the latter. It depends. At times, you will be more propelled by the wind in your sail, and at other times, you will kill the power in your sail by sheeting in, placing the sail a certain way, and then you're only relying on the speed generated by the wave and where your board is positioned on the wave. So it's a constant dance of grabbing, harnessing the wind power, letting it go, harnessing the wave power, sometimes both, sometimes only one of those two. And that's part of how you create the flow, is how you juggle these. And so, yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it sounds really fun. Um, okay, and then when you, because I know that do you still have the world record for the biggest wave windsurfed by a woman? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
when you did that, was it mostly about just riding the wave and surviving, or were you like doing tricks on that wave as well?
No, I was just trying to survive.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and how does that work? Explain that to me.
um, which part are you interested in?
Well, just like you just the idea of like chasing this big wave and then like, how do you get out back with the windsurf and then like how do you catch it? And then like when you're dropping in, like how do you stay on your board? Because like surely some of these waves are super steep, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, like how does it just not all go wrong?
Yeah. It can sometimes, it does, but yeah, in those kind of waves, the very big ones, I tend to be more selective and catch fewer waves and be sure of myself when I do go for one wave. Yes, the wave becomes steep at one point, but it's it starts with just a swell on the outside until it becomes the steep killing wave, and in between, at a certain moment and in a certain place, there is the right place for you to drop in, where you're going to get enough speed that you're going to actually be able to drop in. If you don't, the wave is just going to pass you and
Yeah.
you're going to miss it. But not so much speed that you're actually in the power where it's completely vertical, and then you airdrop, and then that can be problematic. So you want to find a sweet spot. It's all about that, the sweet spot always. And it takes patience, it takes practice and observing people around you. And some waves will allow you to make to work your way progressively toward the sweet spot from the safe zone. And some of the waves won't. And so jaws, for example, is very hard to catch on the shoulder, is what we would call kind of the safe way of riding the wave,
Right.
because it's so big and soft and round that it would be like you standing with your skis on a mountain that's not steep enough and the wind is blowing you off the face of that mountain, so if you
Right.
want to be able to go down, it's got to have that slope, that steepness. So you have to put yourself a little bit in the danger zone. Otherwise, you're not catching any waves out there. And so that's why it's so scary and difficult. And that's why I ride so few waves when I'm out there, because I want to be sure that I can make it. You're never 100% sure, but I'm definitely not taking as much risk as I would on a smaller wave. So that's the first part, is finding that sweet spot to drop in. And then once you do, it's drawing the right line. You don't want to go straight down the wave, because once you're at the bottom of the wave, there's no slope anymore, there's no steepness. That means there is no way to create speed from your board, and sometimes the wind speed will not be enough for you to escape the wave. So you have to be high enough but not too high, and again, sweet spot, and find that line, and try and predict how the wave is going to peel also, because sometimes it seems like the wave is going to peel very slow, sometimes fast. And so it's a little bit of sometimes it reminds me of the game of pool where you're trying to predict the trajectory of the ball that you're going to throw, you know. And so that's the same. You're seeing a wave at a time, and you're in your mind predicting that in 1 or 2 seconds it will look this way, and this is where you're going to pick this line, but you're not sure. And sometimes it's not what you predicted, and you have to do last minute adjustment, but it's not always possible. So yeah, it's a constant play with prediction, finding the sweet spot, adapting your trajectory, and it all happened very fast and kind of subconsciously almost.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get a bit more into that, but just like a really simple question. Are you attached to the board?
You have what's called foot straps. So they're
Okay.
just like little padded half straps that you can slide your foot in, but you can get out of them supposedly easily. Sometimes you can get stuck, and that's when bad injuries happen. But yeah,
Okay. Because it seems like if you do crash, there's maybe a lot more to hit you or to land on compared to just normal surfing. Is that right? Like, does your equipment add a safety hazard in a way?
it can sometimes. I've seen situations where people got wiped out and they were still attached to their equipment because one foot stayed attached. Or you also wear a harness with a hook that allows you to use the rest of your body to pull on the sail. And so if that gets attached to the equipment too, that can be a problem. But usually it's another skill that you develop as you practice wave sailing, is how to bail and get the equipment away from you. And usually you want it to be down compared to where the wave is, so that it's not going to be pushed onto you, but it's going to be pushed away from you by the wave. So
Okay.
sometimes it doesn't happen the right way, but usually you build the skill, and you do it.
Yeah. And then you mentioned this wave, Jaws. How can you, what defines that wave? Because every wave is different, right?
Yeah, this wave, I mean, it is so much, and it is so much for so many people. That's also what's crazy. It's almost like a monument in the sport of surfing, not just windsurfing, but any surfing sport. And so when it breaks, it's actually rare that it happens. A lot, you have to have a storm big enough coming into the North Pacific that it will create the swells necessary for the wave to break. On a day like today, if you go out there and check it out, there's no wave. And
But wait,
so
how do you know that a wave is Jaws or not? What is it, just a certain height, or is it a certain formation? Is it a shape? Like, what makes a wave a Jaws wave?
it's a spot, it's a place,
Oh, it's a
it's a
place.
location.
Sorry. I thought this was a type of wave. Sorry. I'm being very serious.
That's okay. No, that's actually interesting also to realize how we take things for granted of what they mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, we give in
So it's
surfing we give nicknames to a lot of places, and so Jaws is the name of the wave. It's the name of the place. The Hawaiian name for that place is Peahi,
okay.
and then Jaws is kind of its nickname because of the shape of the wave and because it wants to eat you.
Okay. So basically
But
it's a place when there's a big storm coming from the north, it creates Jaws waves at the jaw place.
yes, at Peahi, at Jaws, yes.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah,
And
each wave is looks the way it looks because of the topography of the ocean. So
yeah.
if you have reef, sand, if you have there's a very famous wave also of the coast of Portugal called Nazaré, because there's a deep canyon at the bottom of the ocean, and it just creates giant waves there. And so yeah, that's what makes each wave unique also, is how nature has kind of shaped the bottom of the ocean, and then the waves look like they do. So we can't recreate them anywhere else. Even though now people are creating wave pools, it will never quite be exactly like the ones nature has built.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. So, what happens in your local community when down at that beach a storm comes in and the waves are big? What goes on?
There's a tension in the air for sure. Everybody kind of the days before talk about it, and there's that tension of, okay, we're getting ready. You get your equipment ready, and usually on the day of, you'll have a lot of people who go watch on the cliffs, so it'll be really crowded and people come and watch. It's like, I don't know, the gladiators of of the ocean, and so yeah, it can be quite crowded on the shoals.
Okay, yeah. Um, and so when that happens, when there's big waves and a big swell, what are you trying to do? Um, what are some of your goals? So outside of competition.
Um, well, it's for me, I think something I try to remind myself when I go out there is to not let that journey, that adventure be something that I would do for others, because it is so dangerous, and at the same time it is also so praised these days. It has become kind of a bit of a zoo in a sense, where before it used to happen a little bit in a dark corner, I would say. Like, not there will not always be documentation of those things happening. And where I learned to windsurf back at home in New Caledonia, we had some pretty big threatening waves, and I rode them for a couple of years without anybody watching me besides the few other friends that were there with me. And I drew a lot of joy out of that experience, about because it was not a quest that was for someone else. It was really for me. And so now, with sponsors and records and attention and all that, so it can kind of poison the dream a little. And I'm aware of that, and I'm trying to make sure I never go because I want to prove something to someone else, but just because I want to experience something for myself. And
Mm.
so that's a top goal for me, is to really make sure that I'm enjoying the experience. And it can be very confusing because you deal with very strong emotions out there. There is an enormous amount of fear, and so it can be hard sometimes to clearly see what you're feeling inside of you, and if you're really wanting to do that. But because there has to be a point where you push yourself a little to go through the fear. And so I just want to make sure that when I'm making that push, I am still making it by, well, being true to myself rather than true to someone else. So that's the challenge. And yeah, trying to keep that experience something really for me, even though I ended up setting this record, and I still think of it as a way for me to continue doing what I love to do, but not as an end goal. And I think that's why I've been successful at riding those waves, is because I'm not making decision based on fear of, oh, what if I come home and I didn't catch a wave today and they're going to make fun of me, when I go there, I tell myself sometimes, maybe you're going to spend the afternoon trying to catch those waves, and you're going to come home and you will have nothing to show. And who cares? Because you were out there and you're learning and you just want to be out there, right? So yeah, that's what happens up there.
That's really cool. I mean, so basically, I asked you what is your goal, and I thought you were going to say like to ride the biggest wave, or to, you know, or to find the right challenge or something like that. But really, you have like a mindset goal, and it's to make sure that you are motivated for the reasons that you want to be motivated by. Um, so how do you continuously check yourself, right? Because I guess when you leave home in the morning, you're like, yes, I want to be there for me. I want to be there because I love it. But then when you're there and everyone's watching and like, maybe if you just pushed a bit more, then you would catch that wave and you wouldn't go home empty-handed. How do you check in with yourself and how do you know like what's a good motivation and what's a motivation that's not coming from where you want it to?
I think a lot of that mental work I actually do prior to going out there. It's kind of setting things straight in my mind when I'm not anywhere near riding those waves. It's just more when I'm day to day journaling and reviewing what I care about, what makes me, what do I consider a measure of success for my passion and my days. And so it's all this work prior that puts me at peace, so that if I decide that I'm going to go ride those waves, then I can go with the flow and just trust my instinct, trust my subconscious decisions. Because when it's time to decide, do I catch this wave or not, everything goes so fast, you don't have time to weigh a ton of things. So I go on instinct, and I like to believe that I have strong instincts, that I can trust them. But I also think that it takes work, and it takes working on visualizing this dream, what it means to you, how do you measure that, what it is not. And when that work is done prior, this is how you can let go and make it happen. Last year there was or earlier this year there was a job as well that I didn't go to because I was not feeling confident enough. I had been dealing with a bit of a shoulder pain issue, and so I just knew that I was not interested in being out there without feeling like I could bring my 100% self, even though I was like, oh, but maybe. And it was a year where we barely had any swells to ride the wave. So maybe I should push, maybe. And I went through all the scenarios in my head and weighed every possibility, and came to the conclusion that no, what was true to myself was not to go to this for this well. So yeah, then, but if I did decide to go, I would not have questioned that anymore. I'm like, okay, once I make the decision, and I've looked at that, you're in the moment, you have to be focused. So you can't allow too much backing off, even though I will still allow myself, when if I'm out there and all my instincts are telling me like this is not a good day, this is terrible, I will still listen. But yeah, I think the majority of the work is prior.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what is going through your mind when you're out there then? If you're doing all this mindset work prior to going and you're feeling motivated and you're out there, do you use any tools or strategies in the moment to kind of help you focus and help you tune into intuition?
Yes, I've used hypnosis tools in the past, and I continue to. I use mental anchors. So just using an image with a sound and some words, or sometimes attaching it to some movement you can do with your bodies. So crossing your fingers in a certain way, or with your toes, or and practicing strengthening a mental anchor, so that you can very quickly switch to a state of calm or focus, or breathing also, obviously, slowing down your breath, but also not too much. You still want to be alert. So there's energizing breath and calming breath that I use depending on which one I need the most. But yeah, I've tapped into a lot of those things over the last few years, and found a lot of tools, a lot of fun things with hypnosis, with neuro linguistic programming, and I find that they are not only helpful for big waves, but for day-to-day life. Sometimes we can be just as hyped up as if there was a giant wave coming at us, and we're just dealing with, I don't know, taxing people or whatever. So yeah.
Nice. Um, yeah, so I really don't know much about hypnosis at all. Is this something that where you went and you worked with a practitioner, or did you do a course in it yourself? And yeah, like what does that actually look like? Do you do work away from the wave, but then you also have some kind of trigger when you're out there as well?
Um, Yeah, it's there's so much about it. Hypnosis is a really fun thing. A lot of people kind of imagine the, you know, the pendulum and being turned into a chicken, but it's got nothing to do with that. I was introduced to it thanks to Leah Nees from Cephalohypnosis. She's amazing, and so we did an 8-week course together, and she basically was coaching me for this whole time, and so what I really remember being transformative was working on limiting beliefs that are deep in your subconscious, things that you think about yourself that can be limiting you, but that you never maybe fully voice out, and they just come out in ways of you to compensate or act or overcompensate. So I don't know, for example, like I'm a very small woman, and I can think that I'm fragile, and I'm working on the belief that no, I'm very strong. I trained a lot. I'm prepared. I'm very prepared, and so I had mantras that I worked on really integrating not only at the conscious but also the subconscious level, and it takes being in a state of deep relaxation. So sometimes it will look like a meditation when you're doing a guided hypnosis. You relax your mind, you relax your body, so that then you're able to introduce those beliefs and those messages to the subconscious. And at times you will notice that it's almost fighting back, like it doesn't want to change, or it's scared of what you're trying to do to it. So there are tools and specific hypnosis tool to distract a part of your mind while you're talking to another part of it. And yeah, it's vast, and it's fun. And I did it for 8 weeks straight, and I remember at the end of the course we actually had jaws waves, and one out there, and could almost feel like the two sides of my brain, the one that was talking out of those fear-based beliefs, and the one that was confident and knew that we had done the work, and that was the one that was riding in the pilot seat and not completely killing the other one, because sometimes you do need the fear to stop you from doing something bad. But it was just interesting how I felt like time was being slowed down, and I had the peace to really identify which part of my brain to trust, and which fear was the right fear, or the one that we could just tame down. So yeah, hypnosis is really, really fun.
Oh, cool. I'm interested. Um, you mentioned the fear-based beliefs. So like in your mind, like when is fear helpful? When is it not helpful? And how do you, because people talk about this difference between rational and irrational fear. And I don't know if I really like that distinction. And if you want me to, I can explain why. But um, I
Yeah,
think
please,
that
I'd love to.
okay. Well, I don't really like it. Firstly, because it when people say like, "Oh, your fear is irrational," they're what they're often referring to is the fact that you're physically safe potentially, but you might not be psychologically safe. So, like for example, in climbing, some people have fear of falling, and someone must, but sometimes it's really safe to fall, like sort of like rationally, it's safe to fall because you're not going to hurt yourself. But if you have a fear of falling or you have past trauma around falling or something like that, it still doesn't make sense for you to take a huge fall. Um, so because there's psychological risk there, right? You could harm yourself psychologically. So like it makes more sense for me. It makes more sense in my mind to ask the question, in what way is your fear serving you? And how can I challenge myself appropriately given my experience level? Not is my fear rational or irrational? And then the other side is like, sometimes I climb and I like don't have a rope. It's called free soloing, for example. And like rationally, I should be afraid. But in that moment, is it helpful for me to have like a really strong fear response? Like, is it the right thing to do? Or is it better to just try to manage our experiences as best as we can? So for me, it's just like the distinction. I understand where it comes from, but I don't know like how helpful it is, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely not black and white. And something that I like, I think something, what is the saying? It's real but not true. Like you can have a fear, it is real. You really have the fear. Your body is physiologically experiencing fear, but it's not true that the thing you're afraid of is actually going to happen. So that's,
Mm.
oh, it's not happening right now, at least. And
Yeah.
so,
And I guess, what comes into that is just like anxiety is always born out of like your mind not being present, right? And making predictions about the future. It's whether those predictions, you know, are good predictions or not that I guess we should focus on, but also how to manage that fear and also not to ignore it and like push it away. Because I think in climbing sometimes, and I don't know if this happens in windsurfing, is like people end up in places that they're not really ready for psychologically because they like rationally go, I shouldn't be afraid right now, but like their hands are shaking and the breath rates right up, and they're really stressed, they're really tense, their performance is dropping, and but they keep pushing on because they're like, I shouldn't be afraid, if you know what I mean. So it's
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
it's like we have to slowly expose ourselves to situations that are more challenging in order to manage fear. We can't just kind of like push, push all the time. Um, yeah, I don't know like how you feel about that.
um, it makes me think of waves, actually. You know how I was telling you that to catch a wave at Jaws, it's hard to progressively work your way to the sweet spot. You wish you could start in the safe zone and
Mm,
progressively get close to the sweet spot. Unfortunately, you kind of have to be on the line to get to drop in the wave. And by definition, doing something scary is going close to the edge, close to the line where you're not sure fully if that's something you're going to be able to do well or not. So you and it would be nice if we could only go from the safe end to this line, but sometimes we attack it from the other side of it, which is the too far. And so
mm,
I I try to give myself grace because well it has happened to me with training, for example, like experiencing overtraining syndrome because I train too hard, and so dealing with the consequences of that is it's a lot of things happening in your body that are not fun. and and I think that as if if you're interested in being on the edge, on the line, on that sweet spot, you're gonna have to accept that sometimes you go a little too far, but hopefully you learn from it, and hopefully you put things in place with tools or resources so that you can guarantee that you won't hurt yourself in the process.
Hmm.
But
I guess
I
the
think,
thing
yeah,
is, sorry, go on.
no, that you go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you know, you like we have situations like that in climbing, right? Where you can't just like gradually increase the challenge. Like sometimes you just have to go for it and you can't control everything for sure. But I guess, you know, you probably work your throughout your career, you've worked your way up to surfing bigger and bigger waves. Um, so you kind of have managed it in that way, right? It's not like everyone starts their windsurfing career at the Jaws beach. So it's like we have to sort of like gradually expose ourselves to physically more demanding challenges, but also psychologically more demanding challenges. And that's where we build that trust in our bodies. Um, yeah, like do you feel like you've done that in windsurfing and like how do you manage that when the wave is so unpredictable?
Mm, I um I lower the expectation. I That's how I do it. Something that's hard is that, and it's for every surfing sport. Obviously, like you said, there is an a, a big picture, gradual build up, but there's still on a smaller scale moments where sometimes you're forced to get out of your comfort zone. You wish that on your first day of surfing the waves are small, and you come back the next day and they're just a little bigger and then a little bigger, but
Yeah.
actually they will get huge, tiny, medium, huge again, tiny, and then and you're constantly having to adapt. So if you feel like the challenge is there and you only feel like you can provide this, then I lower the expectation. I tell myself, well, then if you really want to be out there, then just be out there. Maybe don't do anything very special, but
Right.
observe, learn from the day, um, ride next to waves, don't expect to catch a wave. And oftentimes when I start with that, I I'm calmer and I build confidence and I end up doing more than what I set the expectation on, you know. So, and I was like this on my very first day. I think that that's a good story actually to illustrate what we're talking about, because the first time I went to Jaws, I was on Maui. I had been on Maui for about 3 months at that point. So a year before that, I was an engineering student on the computer 9 hours a day. So I definitely had a lot of questions in my head. Like, was I actually not gradual enough? Was I speeding things up too fast? Was I letting myself get embarked into something because of the hype around it? Or was this fate? Was this on my path for the good reason? Had I done everything I could till that point to be prepared and ready? And it was hard. Nobody was able to make that decision for me. There was not someone else that could tell me, you have the skills, you check the boxes, you're good to go. It was just my own decision. And I coped with it because I told myself, well, just go to go. And if it looks super gnarly, you don't even have to rig your sail. You'll just watch it and people will make fun of you and say that you wasted a spot, but whatever, just you'll deal with that later. And I went there and I looked at it and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to rig my sail and I'm going to sail next to the wave and see how that feels. And then I was like, I'm going to try and catch one, and didn't really end up catching a good wave that day, but but then, yeah, fast forward to a couple years later, that's how I can continue to approach it, you know. With obviously I still want to improve from the previous time that I was there and do a little better, but it is so nerve-wracking that I have to be able to cope. I have to bring myself back to almost the simple childlike things that I enjoy, which are just to be out there and be like, whoa, this is so cool. Look at these big waves. Like, I don't even care if I catch one or not. I'm right next to them and I'm watching them break. And yeah, it would be cool to catch a huge one and have a video and everybody and sponsors be like, oh, that's amazing. But that's kind of like the adult brain. And if I connect back with my child brain, I just want to be out in some really cool nature, well, watch some cool things happening and feel like a kind of a little bit of a part of that. And so yeah, I'm not sure if answers your questions, but it's a tough one. And I think it's always going to be a little tricky to know when we're ready to push through our fear. And it's important to find that childhood, that childlike joy, those little moments that we know that even if we walk away from it, we'll still be able to find something in the journey that we're excited about. We're
Yeah.
excited that we did. Yeah.
No, that's great. I mean, I really like what you said. I mean, you're talking about lowering expectations. Um, yeah, like another way of saying that as well is just like you breaking down the challenge and taking it one step at a time. And like we do that in climbing as well. We have this phrase like just take the gear for a walk. So it's like you can always pack your bag, put your climbing gear in your bag and go for a walk. And then if you happen
Yeah.
to find yourself underneath a cliff, then maybe you can climb it, but you don't need to commit to that right now. And I think sometimes when we're like, I'm going to go and climb the biggest thing, or I'm going to go and surf the biggest wave or whatever, it's too much for our brains to handle. And we can't take the whole challenge in all at once. So it's quite cool that you use that tool. And then I really liked what you said about connecting to your child brain, because that also just made me think of like gratitude as an exercise, it's almost like, you focused on just the things to be grateful for down by the ocean and that being enough, and then like everything else is a bonus. But I like the way you talked about it as being like connecting to your inner child, because I've never really thought of it like that. But I guess that children are just happy to kind of like interact with their surroundings a bit more rather than like getting things out of, like as adults, we often want to like
Yeah.
outcomes. We want to get things out of the day, like tick the boxes. Um, and maybe it's a
Yeah,
shame sometimes.
yeah, that's true. And that's why when I heard you repeat some of the things I said, like I heard you say lowering expectation, and I don't really like the word lower because it gives the idea of like lesser than, less good than, or instead of
Yeah.
aiming for this, we're going to aim for that. But it's not lower, it's just different, a different perspective. Because yeah, like you said, when you're a child, you can be so creative with your mind and turn the whole thing you're living into something mind-blowing fun, and like admire the fact that there's this deep beautiful valley that the waves are breaking right in front, and it's almost mystical, and it's got that energy, and maybe you see a turtle or even a shark or something that kind of makes you like just that all moments. And yeah, and I build a lot of my mental anchors around childhood symbols, actually, because I grew
Mm.
up in on a tropical island. We would spend a lot of time on boats and atolls and the whole universe of pirates and adventures, and that's kind of how I would play with my brothers and my cousins, and so I build a lot of my mental anchors using those symbols because they really attach me to those sensations of like, let's go, it's the adventure, who cares if we get the best video tonight or whatever, we're out there, we're having fun. And if I can't catch a wave, at least I just try and go as fast as I can on my board, and cheer my friends or whatever. But yeah, it re-expands your mind instead of this narrow focus of I need to achieve this specific thing that kind of puts so much pressure and yeah, again, narrows the
Mm.
focus. So
Yeah, and then like another thing that came to mind there actually was like all those things that you said you did also help you become more present, right? So like if you break down the task to the things that you actually have to do right now, you're being present, and then to connect to your inner child, you're also more present. Um, do you think a lot about whether you're present or not during your sport?
yes, I worked on it this year with a mental coach, and a very fun exercise was to create a framework to have different measures of satisfaction out there. Because at time I found earlier this year I was getting frustrated when I would train. I was not finding joy when I was not able to improve technically. And so I would come back from my session and be like, today I did not manage to land these moves or improve these moves. I'm upset, I'm done, it's not working out. Problem is, it's got to be almost 90% of that before there is actually completion. You got to deal with that. Like it's the image of watering a plant and nothing happening for years. We have to keep watering, and then something will grow. But so working on that, doing this exercise of okay, what are the things from the beginning that made me fall in love with the sport? And it was not just improving technically. Obviously, that's an element of it. It's very satisfying when you work at something and you achieve it. But there were a lot of other elements. And when I was able to gather them, work on them, write them down, visualize them, then I found myself better able to pick on them in the moment. I'll be like, okay, I'm connecting with nature right now. That's one reason I love this sport. Okay, I feel like I'm somewhere where I'm not supposed to be. And that's something I like about myself and about this sport. Like right now, there is only three of us out there, and the waves are crazy, and I'm out there, and it's great. I'm not doing anything great, but I'm out there and I'm feeling great. So I think that's a really good exercise to do with whatever we're working out that can have some periods of long periods of hard work. And we want to make sure we find satisfaction even when we're not seeing the needle move forward. And yeah, it's important because the journey is the dream. You actually spend more time on the journey than to your destination. So making sure that at every step of it, you can not miss out on what the first reasons why you got onto that journey, then it's going to make sure that you feel joy. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I really like that. Um, just a few more things. You mentioned flow quite a bit. Um, do you kind of think about like the state of flow and accessing flow, and do you know, for you, is that synonymous with like your best performances? Um, yeah, like what do you think about flow?
Um, yeah, I mean, finding that balance between letting go enough, but still making decisions. That's when usually I get the best waves, the best rides. There is also this weird interaction with the wave. It's almost like a dance, and sometimes you just got to go with it. And this is more flow, not in the neuroscience term where they're like losing yourself into a task that you don't have any more concept of time or whatever, but more like flowing with the wave that has its own flow, and finding its rhythm and dancing with that. And just it's maybe it's a little bit of a mythical idea, but I just feel like some days you're able to just connect better with the wave, and also you see people do that. You're like, oh my God, today this person is really flowing on the wave. They have this sense, this connection with the rhythm of the ocean, and then they're able to dance with it as if they've known each other for their whole life. So, yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I really like that. You're making me want to try your sport.
That's good. We need more people.
Yeah, just finally, like, it sounds like you've worked with someone with hypnosis. You also mentioned a mental training coach. Like, how important is your strength of mind for what you do?
Um, Very important. It's also for, it can be a bit of a lonely sport at times. It's not, you're not in a team. You're not training necessarily with someone else. And I've been a little isolated at times on my quest just because it's not a path followed by a lot of people. So it's hard sometimes to know to be I don't know to see clearly, and so I think that the first reasons why I seek mental training was to put things in order in my head, in my mind, and more than to actually perform um, in the sport. And it has actually helped me tap into more community, I find, and realizing I was actually surrounded by a lot of cool people. But yeah, it really kind of bridges with almost like therapy, which I've never done, but sometimes wish to be able to know myself better. But I find that mental training is a bit of that, is knowing yourself. So this is why I
Yeah,
like it.
yeah, cool. Great. Well, it was wonderful talking to you. Thanks so much for your time. And yeah, all the best with all of your endeavors.
Thank you. I'm going to be waiting for you to send me a windsurfing picture. That would make oh my year for sure. If I can convince someone that was asking me if jazz is a
Type of
way a
wave.
thing that happens, try to windsurf a couple months later. That's the big win for windsurfing. You have no idea. No, thank you so much for your genuinity, and it's cool to be able to talk about the sport from an angle like yours, coming from climbing and different perspective. It's hopefully allowed me to analyze myself in a different, fresher way, and I hope some of those stories are helpful or at least fun for people to listen to.
They will be for sure. Yeah. Thanks a lot.